Oops.
It's recording. Jasmine, do you want to quickly do an introduction and then we can pass?
Yeah, of course. Thank you everyone for joining us for another session. As you know, this is a series of sessions that from Mission 4.7 and the Center for Sustainable Development, we believe in youth voices. So giving youth a platform to expose on things that they care about, and panels, interviews. We have had even poetry readings. So it's been a very exciting last few weeks. Our next panel is called School Cafeterias and Climate Change. What's your connection? Developing a student playbook for curbing climate change and cafeteria waste across schools. And I'm going to leave it to our lovely EcoAmbassadors and students to go ahead and start your panel.
All right, we can just get right off the bat. Thank you for the great introduction. So yeah, my name's Chris. I'm a student at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire. I'm a sophomore right now, and I'm one of Readington Middle School's EcoA youth advisors, and I graduated from there like around 2 years ago. So I'm gonna hand it off to Sophia to talk a little bit about herself.
Yes, so I'm Sophia. I'm a senior at Lower Moreland High School, located out just outside of Philadelphia. And so as we move to the next slide, I'll talk about some of the 4 pillars that we use to guide us in the 3 Ps.
Before we do that, I'd like to introduce myself and me and my colleagues. I'm Marcos, and I'm in 7th grade. I'm the EcoAmbassadors Operation Leads here at RMS, and I'll hand it off to Noah now.
I'm Noah Bielen. I'm the research lead at RMS, and I'm also in 7th grade.
I'm Callum. I'm the EcoA strategy lead, and I'm in Readington Middle School, and I'm in 7th grade. So I think now that we've finished introductions, we can move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Callum. So as this regeneration, we're a generation tasked with bringing our climate crisis under control, not just for the health and well-being of humans, but also for ecological health, all life from our land to waters, ocean common. Climate change is a threat multiplier. Our stressors like overpopulation, environmental degeneration, economic and social inequities can cause problems to multiply and intensify for vulnerable populations. So outreach, equity, and our collective action will be key in our approach. And it's why we use the UN Global Goals and the 3 Ps as our guide: people, planet, prosper. They remind us that social inclusion and cohesion, sustainable practices, and good governance are all necessary for a good society. And while individuals can do their part, we understand that sustainable development starts with all of us, and that includes governments, businesses, large organizations, and academic institutions too.
Right now, our goal is to curb climate change and food waste in our school and across schools globally too. We're focusing on SDGs 13.3 responsible consumption and production by cutting the amount per person food waste globally in half by 2030. That 50% goal is an international, national, and state goal too, so there should be lots of support. We know global food waste and food loss generate about 8% of human-induced greenhouse gases, so we'll connect SDG 12.3 climate action in a big way by building people's knowledge and resilience to meet the challenges climate change brings. Finally, we know we depend on SDG 4.7, quality education for informed decision making. It's one of the reasons all of us on this panel are eco-ambassadors, including our teacher too. Because education for sustainable development and global citizenship are critical to meet these challenges in this decade of action.
So the main problem is food waste in our school. And not only is food getting wasted when food is thrown out, but also water that has been put into producing all that food is also wasted. And so about 25% of the water used in producing food is wasted internationally. And also, we tie food waste into climate change because food waste emits methane. And this methane, if food waste were its own country, it'd be the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter. And so what happens to this food waste to create methane is it goes to the landfill where it gets broken down and it creates methane that gets trapped into the atmosphere.
So in 2021 food waste audit by Penn State, students in many grades, waste vegetables and fruit the most, and that's 50% of plate waste. And on the other end of the spectrum, wasted the least are eggs and poultry. And we saw they also mentioned in the study that baked beans are often thrown out by more of the younger audiences and younger grades. And in their audit specifically, they use weighing and photography of plates to quantify, I guess, like the amounts of foods that are wasted on a regular basis. And they sorted through not only the trash can, but the plate and the kitchens to find out what did kids just generally not eat. So when I was back in RMS, we did a food waste audit, and we definitely really enjoyed working with it because it helped us bring the perspective of food waste to the forefront. And we sorted through the trash, and it was definitely a lot harder to do because it was just all of the food had gone mashed up and such. And I'm gonna hand it off to one of the younger guys to talk about like how their experience after like the pandemic and how that's impacted food waste.
Thank you, Chris. So what we saw with the pandemic was these free school meals, which we think is awesome because every kid needs access to a healthy, nutritious meal every day. But what we noticed is an unintended consequence with the free lunches. Students had to select a fruit and or vegetable with it, and what we were seeing is a lot of fruit and vegetables were getting thrown out in the cafeteria. We also have to dig through our waste to be able to see it because the waste is getting thrown out, and then the only reason we can't see it, so a lot of this is an unknown problem because it's not a problem that people could physically see every day. We have to dig through the trash to find out what the hidden problems are in the world. And like you see in the research here, we have to take pictures of the food to see what is taken out, but then what is returned, because we can see it's in the trash can. But with the pictures, we're able to see what kids are eating and what kids are not eating, and then we can take responses to that.
So we like helped organize our thinking using the 4 pillars of 4.7, and that helps us, collaborate and learn together. So the 4 pillars are understand, and advocate, mobilize for action, communicate and educate, and share best practices. And tools that we found were really, really helpful were on the left, and those were focusing on SDGs and keeping them at the forefront of our mind, and systems thinking because that helps us refine our thinking and organize it, tracking change over time, making our personal thinking visible, and keeping people and people's needs like really important to us and grounding us in that. And that's what Maslow's hierarchy of needs helps us understand. So Sophia is gonna talk about like some of the tools and how we brainstormed our tools, I guess.
Yeah, so the first thing we did was brainstorm all the different tools that we use. We organized them by these 4 pillars of SDG 4.7, and just really thinking about the ways we use this in our actions for change. We decided that we would share all of our tools in a playbook that we're developing now in the event that others might find them useful when working on their action projects for the SDGs. And if you just glance at advocacy, you'll see at first glance some different methods to systems thinking, all which help uncover and see the underlying causes deep below the surface, to surface and test assumptions and to think long and wide. Changing perspectives helps us increase and deepen our understanding, to see different leverage points and also the interdependencies in relationships. And just speaking from my experience in public forum debate, these tools translate into real life skills. And when my partner and I had to tackle resolution from both a pro and con standpoint, we go to empathy maps and iceberg models first to get down to the root cause. And likewise, in every action we take in our Girl Up Club chapter at my school, we look to unpack experience to discuss key stakeholders. We share a common goal to bring action, awareness, and advocacy to the SDGs, empowering all women and girls and ourselves too. When we have discussions like these, we've realized that the needs we did address also revealed the ones we didn't, because we didn't have to. Actually, in a session earlier this week with Anna Petty, co-author of the Youth Leadership and Climate Policy Workbook and Facilitator's Guide, we did just that in an activity from the workbook, where we were exploring and considering how people's identity often impacts how they're treated in society: gender, disability, maybe the ability to read or write, poverty, citizenship status, religion or race, many more. Callum, Marcos, Noah, and Chris, you guys are open or free to talk about ways you have been able to use some of these tools in your context as well.
Yeah, I think going on to Sophia's point, I think it's definitely very applicable to everything you use in all your daily life, and they're very important skills for communication. So I think the first step is understanding and advocate, and one of the tools we use to do that is concept maps. And to put it simply, concept maps is just sharing what your personal knowledge about a subject is and just mapping it all out. So the right one, you can definitely do it online or in person. I personally like doing it on a whiteboard, like the one on the left, and then the right is just a lot neater and a lot easier to visualize. And for the right one, for example, you take a main concept and then focus on the other inputs and outputs of it, and try to understand, on a pretty basic level, like what makes up a certain thing, and keep branching out, almost like a web. And up next, I think Noah will talk about, empathy maps and how not only that helps us understand our knowledge, but understand people as a whole.
Like Chris said, you can do an empathy map on any like online or in person on like a whiteboard. And this is another tool that we use in school, which is human-centered design. The empathy map helps us as producers to create to fit the needs of the users. You can see in the first part that you see think and feel. You see what he sees, say and do and hear. And these are all things that we take into consideration when we're making something or anything else. And you can see at the bottom pains and gains, so you can further understand what the user is feeling.
So an example of this would be last year, we created this tool that would help kids at home be more interactive with students in school when we were virtual. And so what we had to do was we had to come from the perspective of someone who was virtual, how may their being virtual affect their pains and their gains. So it might hurt them because they're virtual, they're not interacting with kids in class. We had to take into account what they were seeing actually in class, so we could make a simpler and more streamlined design that really takes part in every issue and takes every part of the issue and really hits on it.
So I think what's like really important is, looking at the problem and understanding the root cause behind it, because on the surface we see the event, but deep down under it is really the rationale and thinking behind it, and the mental models in place. So we use the system thinking Iceberg to help us deal with this. And on the top we have events, underneath is patterns, structures, and mental models. And by extending our thinking and assisting us in articulating like issues in new and diverse ways, and I think systems thinking, broadens, our options and thinking as a whole, for addressing the problem. And systems thinking like helps us realize that it's not just one correct answer, but we have many different decisions that we make that impact other aspects of the system, and like we can make our own decisions and utilize it to our own advantages. And systems thinking, like the iceberg that we see on the screen, helps us understand a lot of different things that we do every day, and help us like understand issues that we see in the world. So for example, we could talk about cafeteria waste, and I think this is an example I put on the right hand side, and that's that you see a lot of the cafeteria waste in different forms, whether that be plastic waste, half-eaten lunches, so on. underneath the patterns is that people don't finish eating and throw it out consistently. And, they don't really feel inclined to take it home because they're not enjoying the food while they're at school. The underlying structures in place, include like a lack of education surrounding reducing, recovering, and recycling waste, as well as, the emphasis and onus being on the consumer to know and care about, what they're doing with the waste they produce. And the mental models in place, include the mentality of the students in schools, how they don't necessarily feel stewardship towards their school, and sometimes, don't really care about where the waste is going. So up next, Noah's going to be talking about QFT, or question formulation thinking, and or technique, and how that helps us understand research.
The QFT, or question formulation technique, is a good way to get all your ideas on the board. There's 3 simple steps that you take when doing this. You first take 3 minutes to write down all the questions you have about a certain topic. And this is like with no judgment, and you list as many as you can and number them. Second step being label them open-ended or closed questions. And then after that, you find your top 3 questions that you want to research about. The QFD helps with the broaden idea to funnel it down to what you want to research about.
And these QFTs get everyone talking about the problem, because then we change them to closed and open-ended questions, and we put them in topics. So this gives us a deeper understanding of the topic we're trying to research. Because with these topics, they're very complex. They have problems within the problems. So what we have to do is make these QFTs so that we deepen our knowledge base and we are able to get in really deep into the problem.
So one of our biggest tools that we use for while we're researching is finding credible sources, and I think that's really important because they really are the forefront of investigations, and help us dive into topics that we don't necessarily know too much about, such as food waste. So we use the CRAP test, and that helps us evaluate research sources. So at the top there's C, which stands for currency. So how recent was it published? And I guess the timeliness of the info. R is the relevance and how the info fits into your needs as far as the research. What does it give to you, and how does it help you understand your questions better? A stands for the authority of the source. You want to make sure it's from a good site and it's not just being created on the spot. A is the accuracy, the reliability, and correctness of the info, and I think that's really important by cross-checking and corroborating sources to make sure that all your info is consistent. And P is the purpose. Why does the reason why this research or info exists? And by using this tool, we can help understand whether our research sources are always reliable, I guess. And I'm gonna give this off to Callum because I think all these research leads to notes, and for example our food waste notes. And I think sharing notes is a really important thing for us.
Thank you, Chris. So in these notes, we use a special notes formula in Cornell Notes, where on one side we have the question and topic, so we are aware of what it is and it's organized so we can go through our notes quickly and find the topic we're looking for. And then we have the source on the side, so we know if it's an expert we're listening to or if it was a video we watched. And then in the middle, we have the meat of the notes, the actual notes. And we want to make sure they're organized well, where they have the section title above it and then the notes underneath. So we are able to get these notes. And this really ties into the CRAP test, because with these notes, we're always making sure we're using proper sources. And so we're making sure we're doing these correctly.
To add on to that, I think one thing that's really important is experts, and we're always surrounded by experts. So I was wondering, does anyone want to share their experience with an expert that helped shape their knowledge and passion for research?
I think we have actually some experts on call with us. Ms. Freeman, an expert in green initiatives, particularly in education, and Radhika, an expert in international educational development. So experts are just great for offering valuable perspective. I would even go to say that the Readington kids here are experts in food waste and audits. I think this is really important because research is not just limited to, your statistics, studies, or polls, but it also can be based off people's real life experiences and personal experience too. And something just about hearing something from someone, whether that be virtually or in person, can be the needle to spark change.
Another expert that helps us all the time with getting awareness out about our projects is Jasmine. You're holding this event of the symposium, and other experts we work with within our township are like the environmental committee, like leader, our business administrator, and our food service vendor. And they all help us get data, all help us get facts, and get us on track for our research and projects.
So now I feel like it's a really good time to get a deep dive into some of the research we've done in policy. So before we start, we have to think everyone can make a change in their way of living and saving the planet, and they can make a ripple effect, obviously, by helping others do it. But what really makes a change is more higher up. It's in policy, it's in larger corporations, it's in companies making these decisions. For example, one person choosing not to get that single-use chip bag is helping in a small way. But really, what would really help is the people who are higher up in packaging deciding maybe we shouldn't do single-use bags because they're hurting the environment in this way. So now I think I'll hand it off to Sophia, who's really going to take us on a deep dive into some policy.
Yeah, so this NRDC food waste policy gap analysis and inventory is really just a great example of looking at potential advocacy opportunities in your sphere of influence and policy recommendations in your given area, because this is for the Mid-Atlantic region, and we compared policy from New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So right off the bat, we have one with date labeling, and today it's important to see ways schools can get involved. So looking for campaigns and guidance that we can promote consumer awareness is really important because there are a lot of limitations, whether that be through expiration. So to improve, food insecurity, we want to look at different opportunities. The next opportunity for advocacy we also identified was on share tables. With COVID, there are more limits, with safety, food safety concerns, and actually spoke with the food nutritional director at my school, and that's one of the reasons why we no longer have share tables. But with growing levels of food insecurity, it's important whether or not one has strong or weak policy to promote and find potential opportunities for schools to increase food rescue. And the next one is, above all, while our report is centered around food waste, something that I think is important just across any advocacy for climate action is to draw a link and a direct connection between emission reductions. With food waste, many might not think about what happens once it's in a landfill, but the decomposing organic material with anaerobic conditions cause bacteria in the absence of oxygen, generate methane, which is a much more potent greenhouse gas, which can lead to global warming. I think to transform our passion and concern for climate change into action, it's key to understand current policy, whether that be at a local or global level, because at the end of the day, these issues compound not just our communities, but similarly in other regions of the world. We're working for this common good, and breaking down policy is not just beneficial for our understanding and perspective, but to be informed decision makers together.
This also brings in a tool we use, which is the food waste hierarchy, which connects to climate action goals, because it's a way that the EPA created where we can reduce food waste, which is at the source right away, which is very important because that's somewhere where we're not wasting resources that have already been used. The second area is feeding hungry people. Like Sophia said, there is food insecurity in the world, and we want to help prevent that by donating these unused foods to places that need it. And then it is feeding animals. Obviously, animals, they need food also, and it would be much simpler if they could just get their food from us, because then we won't have to create extra food. The third is industrial uses, which is creating gas or biomass, which can help create this regenerative system that we use all all the time, and it will make our system more regenerative. And then the fourth area we can use it in is composting. This is obviously lower down. People assume this would be higher up, but actually is lower down because all the resources, like Marco said earlier, 25% of water is getting wasted in food. This is a problem because this water could be going to other places and other people who really need it. And then finally, the dreaded landfill, because we don't want the like Sophia said, it's creating methane in that landfill, and that is a potent greenhouse gas, which is affecting the climate.
So up next we have value proposition, and you've done a lot of brainstorming and researching up to this point, and using the tools hopefully that we showed, and we want to always like apply all this research and find and narrow down on like a specific focus, and there's so much interesting research that you could go on, but you want to focus on, or what drives us and what we focus on is what brings value to people. Through tools like Noah's empathy map that he showed earlier. And we want to, help understand people, and most importantly, make the lives of people better and easier. And one example of this is, helping people in the cafeteria. It's not just the students or the producers. It's, the people working in the cafeteria, the people in charge of the landfills. All the people in the system need to benefit from it, and we need to use a tool like the value proposition to help us understand that. And on the left you have products and services you want to offer, and then you have gain creators and pain relievers, and then gains and pains of the person on the right, and that's basically your target audience, if that makes sense.
Now, another thing that ties into the value proposition is that everyone needs to bring in value and their strengths to the table. So like how Callum talked about the strength assessment earlier, where everyone has their strengths. Well, actually, Callum will touch up on that later. We all have our strengths, and if we're not bringing those specific strengths to the table and we're just bringing in other traits that we might have, our work might not be as efficient, or it might not be the best that it can be.
We were inspired by Chris's team and how they started a food audit. But we were quickly shut down by the pandemic, so we decided to take action. We reached out to Chris and Sophia and asked them to share their stories. So we're picking up where they left off and moving from advocacy to mobilization for action. And they agreed to collaborate with us.
Yeah, as we mentioned, our second step is mobilize for action. So there's some more tools that we recommend to help us achieve this step. So I'm going to hand it off to Callum to talk about strength assessments.
Yeah, so we always want to make sure we're doing an effective project and we're making it as efficient as possible. So at the start of the year, everyone takes a Thrively strength assessment and then there's these 23 strengths that we use. This allows us to focus on one's strengths and not one's weaknesses. So it creates more streamlined and effective projects because we're harnessing everyone's strengths and creating a really strong body of work. We look at how our strengths interlock together to work with one another. We do this on projects and just together. So if we look on the right side here, we have two starts of them. So we have the top 5 strengths and then a little blurb about how they are. So we can see on the bottom one that says a self-starter and a hard charger. So these people are really self-starting. They like to drive projects. And then the person on the top who is really assertive, they're strong verbally and have remarkable resilience. So what we see is these people are really going to be if we're doing a project, these people will really be in the driving seat of a project. They will be helping move this project forward. They're not going to be put off by adversity, charging the project forward. And obviously also we're not focusing on one's weaknesses, but it also allows us to see where people may not be as strong, and it allows us to develop where our weaknesses are. And it also helps us realize how a strength can also become a weakness, and how being, say, the person who is strong verbally may be verbal all the time, but this may put people off in the project from stepping up and doing work inside the project when really they should have it all. And we also need all types of different people in these projects, because we can't have all super assertive people being in a project. since we have these strength assessments, it helps us build stronger teams because we can get each part and each strength inside the project. So we're hitting every single thing. And so now I'm going to hand this off to Marcos in a more streamlined way in how we get projects really off the ground and in this groundwork in a design brief.
Thrively helps us find our strengths, as Callum said, and it also helps us with the design brief. Well, I'll hand off to Chris to talk about more thoroughly and deeply into.
Yeah, so as Marcos mentioned, the strengths can help us make a design brief, and that's just the whole point of a design brief is to organize, our research and our thoughts and just, set goals for ourselves because that's what keeps us driving forward. And I think it helps us to keep grounded in the global goals, use our tools that we mentioned before, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, plan a timeline, set requirements and constraints, and, use metrics to help us measure our results. And, it helped us on our food waste projects since, it just helps us plan everything out. And on the left, we have, some of the things that are mentioned inside a design brief. You have an overview, objectives and goals you want to reach, a target audience, like who you're directing your project towards, budget, how much you have to spend, and a timeline because, that's what keeps you driving forward. And I'm going to hand it off to Marcos to talk a little bit about, how we use diagrams, sketches, and process maps.
So we also use these diagrams, sketches, and process maps with our design brief, and they're a really simple way that we can mobilize for action because they help us find leverage points. And I kind of want to invite the audience now. So how do you guys use diagrams in your lives to solve problems or like maybe kickstart projects?
Feel free to come off mute and say anything, or feel free to type it in the chat if you want to.
I guess while other people are thinking, I can just hop right in. So I think what this particular map, for example, helped me understand is that it's not one person in charge or like responsible for food waste. It's not just the producer or the consumer's fault. I think everyone's tied to it, and students, facilities, teachers, everyone is tied into it. I think diagrams and sketches, also help us map out our thinking in a different way and help us visualize our ideas. Also it helps us visualize, for example, a cafeteria throwaway and how that's related to layout, and drawing out for me personally helps me visualize everything that's going on.
And another diagram that we had to use was a map of the cafeteria that was labeled so we could understand really where a lot of the food was wasted. So like if we saw for breakfast that actually where we picked up the food, we knew right away kids were just throwing it straight in the bin. So we had to be able to get a deeper understanding of the cafeteria and how it affects kids and where they're throwing it out and why. So now I think we're just going to move straight into circles of influence and how they can help us create a better project.
So the circles of influence, like the three being the circles of control, influence, and concern. We use these three to influence influence the students to make smart decisions in and out of school. The circle of control of concern is climate change. We need to eliminate food waste in our school and around the world. So
what we thought was this problem was too big for us to eliminate in the world. So what we really had to focus on was our own circles of control. And this is what we can really do ourselves to have this problem, like 12.3 states per capita we have to have with global food waste. So instead of focusing out there on the world, we made sure we focused on our school, and this ties into our circles of influence. These are the people we can really get to help us on the project. So for example, Marcos mentioned earlier, our business administrator, he's in our circle of influence because he allows us, we can ask him for the data of the cafeteria to see what is getting bought. And then we can also influence some organizations to help us. For example, the county sunrise movement that is really on action of climate change. And obviously, like, we wouldn't be here if Chris and Sophia weren't in our circle of influence. So we could bring them here today to help understand the presentation more. So now we're going to move into an efficiency analysis, which really helps us on our projects. So right away, we see these 4 sections. The top left is what is going to make the biggest impact and is going to be the easiest to create. Below that is what is going to make a smaller impact, but is going to be easier. And then on the right side, in the top right, we have something that will make a large impact, but will be difficult. And then in the bottom, it'll be really difficult and it won't make that big of an impact. So what we want our projects to fall in is something we need to put in the top left corner. So in the circle, these are the ones these are low hanging fruit, but what will bear the most fruit actually. So these are going to be easy projects, but will actually make a large impact in our school or society. And then in the bottom below that, we want to hit some things that are easy. And this really lets us get our projects on the ground rolling right away because these are easy and they're just going to get it rolling and get people interested in the projects. What we don't want to focus on is in the bottom right corner. These are not going to make that big of an impact. They're going to be super difficult to do. And it's just not going to be worth it. It's not going to be worth our time, worth the people working on our project. It's just going to bear no fruit and it's going to take too much time. So now I think I'll pass it off to Sophia, who will talk a little bit more about a climate action plan.
So behind any good mobilization to action is a well thought out plan. And up until this point, we've talked about different systems thinking and good research. Now that you've gotten to the step where you think about your school and community and consider everything you've learned and brainstorm what you guys can do to have a greater, more positive impact on climate change and the environment. The first step usually involves another mind map where you're discussing how or where areas of sustainability could be improved. And then you zero in on what you want to develop a plan to by identifying different topic areas like environmental policy, environmental justice, curriculum, or media. There's many more, but now that you've gotten a good idea of your project, you make SMART goals, which stand for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Making goals are a part of a lot of aspects in our lives, and they help provide a sense of direction, motivation, a clear focus, and clarify importance. And that's exactly the aim of these objectives. And the next step is to look into who will make it happen. Often, your climate action plan will require collaboration, and you reach out and connect with others. And by now you know your mission, whose help you need. You just have to lay out the steps in the short term and the long term. That pretty much outlines a good climate action plan, but probably one of the best things you could do is to share it, to be useful for anyone who wants to pick it up in the future. That way it can be built upon and can be a plan that empowers others too.
So one way we help get our climate action plan rolling is by collecting data, and we collect data from students here at schools like RMS with surveys and interviews. And I'll hand it off to Noah to show you how we get these surveys out and make sure every student is getting their work done.
We get the surveys out by getting help from our teachers and like especially our homeroom teachers and academic support teachers, where we know everyone has time to fill out the form. And Marcos will share more about.
Just to answer your question, yes, the surveys are anonymous, but we still can see who's doing it. And one reason we do this is so if there's like certain groups, like a basketball team, maybe they get influenced by one main person, and if their answers are somewhat like each other's, then that's one reason we keep the surveys anonymous to each student, but we get to see who's filling them out.
So yeah, well, I'm gonna be talking about a little bit about the physical audit we conducted a few years ago, and we started off by collecting our data, and through this sorting out the trash, we realized the initial problem on the surface, but we realized what's most important is that we need to educate and understand the thinking and mindset, and all the tools we mentioned before, the iceberg, the empathy map, all of these are really important to helping us understand this systemic issue. And next step, I think that's really important, is education and communication. So I'm going to hand it off to Sophia to talk a little bit about feedback loops.
Yeah, so feedback loops are a great way to break down and analyze cycles and different systems in a reinforcing loop. Change in one direction leads to even more change. So for example, like exponential population growth occurs when parents have more children than there are parents, and then these children grow up to become parents themselves. In a climate context, ozone depletion and climate change is also representative of a positive feedback loop. And to contrast this, balancing loops counter change. Most often you'll hear homeostasis used as an example because your body reacts and works to regulate your body temperature when it becomes too high or low. So what does this mean? Well, the first law of modeling states that if you don't understand a system's key feedback loops, then you don't understand the system. But once you do understand them, you are a giant step closer to controlling the system's behavior. I think this is really important in our approach because systems have many different moving parts, a lot of different dynamics, and often involve a multifaceted approach to solving it. And another useful tool is communication tools we can use to support our advocacy efforts. Conferences, Zooms like these, social media can bolster our outreach by spreading information or awareness about a cause or issues, reinforcing relationships among your community of support, promoting engaging and meaningful dialogue between groups and supporters, and just the opportunity to connect with people and thinking, not just locally, but all over the world. Our Girl Up Club uses our page to connect issues like climate change, education, and gender, but to also tell our story and to inspire and keep people up to date on what we're doing. So maybe if they want to do it, they can. We have a series where we highlight women's success in our community, where we share guidance and tips, because a lot of us are still readying the next phase in our lives. And we also just launched a podcast where we bring experts to discuss just different topics for anyone to listen to. And to the left, you can see already some workshops from this youth symposium. So it's just a great way to communicate, collaborate, and in this context, share our tools for this playbook. And also another useful thing is, which I'll cover briefly, is debate. Debate is very similar and kind of overlaps with a lot of the tools we've already been using, like research or using system thinkings. These really help you articulate your thoughts because you want to think from a pro and con standpoint, to consider other people's perspectives, to work to a greater good and common good, to think about what it is to walk in someone else's shoes, really important to just getting along.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hop into my story map in a little. Okay. So I think the story map is a really helpful tool for us, and I think, yeah, based on time, I think we'll need to skip it for now. But let's talk about our last and final step being best practices, and I'm gonna hand it off to Callum to talk about the network effect.
Thank you. So we heavily rely on the network to get our actions out there and what we do. So basically it happens where I talk about a project I'm doing, someone else talks about it later. So like maybe at a conference like this, and then everyone else hears about it. And then now we have this common goal that everyone is striving to fix. So like food waste, obviously Chris and Sophia were part of that network effect that we use. And you can see in the little graphic in the corner, our EcoAmbassador Readington Middle School's in the middle. And then obviously we have Chris at Phillips Exeter Academy and Sophia in Lower Moreland High School, and then other people that we have connected with. And this allows us, because it multiplies one person's voice from being just one person saying it to a ton of more people saying it out there. So now I think I'll hand it over to Chris to just acknowledge.
Yeah, so this is just a list of a few people that have just helped us along the way. This isn't the end of our playbook, but it's just where we're getting started, and we're really grateful to all the people that have helped us with this. Radhika, Miss Jasmine Mora and all of the people at our school system, and especially Miss Freeman, because she's supported us through all of this, and I'm really grateful to her for helping us out with this.
We would also like to acknowledge you, Chris, and Sophia, for always helping us whenever we need a project done. You guys have really been helping us, just like Miss Freeman, and we've always really thanked you so much.
And of course, always in our corner is our parents, always pushing us to go further and do better. And so thank you to our parents for always doing that.
I think now is a good time that we can open up the floor to any questions that the audience may have. Thank you.
I was just going to ask y'all at Columbia, like, do you think these tools would be helpful for other people to use?
I think I just want to mention that not only the tools, but I think your approach towards, thinking about environmental issues definitely, I think, is something that we can all learn from. And I've seen a lot of youth reports and other things. Maybe I need you to get connected with another UN network on sustainable development group, youth network, and they have come up with a report. And I think report meaning it's almost like a handbook of how do you approach things, but I think your version of the playbook will definitely be a good compendium of not only just seeing, usually I see best practices, but I think this goes beyond best practices. It's basically approach. How do you approach a problem, and how do you actually learn to learn? So once you learn what are the skills that you need to learn, then I think you have a faster track, because then any subject becomes very light, because you have the right approach to learn. You have the tools, you have the thinking, you are thinking in the right direction. And this teamwork was just so amazing. I think it was this dynamics that came out which was super amazing. I don't know how you managed to coordinate, and you are in so much in sync with each other. I think that's probably a big part of how everything is coming together here so well. So I think this is really amazing. It's actually one of my the most amazing presentations in terms of pedagogy, in terms of climate related work. You're not approaching a particular problem, but you are approaching the whole, having a systems thinking approach, but also looking at the tools, and you're taking the cafeteria example and you're going with the problem as an example. So I think this is really a fantastic approach, towards looking at this issue. I also want to share in the chat. I think you guys are ready. If Ms. Freeman, is supportive enough in terms of where you need to go. Maybe Ms. Freeman, do you think this conference, which is a conference on International Conference of Sustainable Development, send in your paper and send in this idea there. I think it will be a next step where we have a lot of sustainable development colleagues coming in there, and I think they will really benefit from your approach. Maybe have that playbook ready, and it can be publicized through various networks. We are working on a US based SDG centering policy paper or a group. Jasmine and I are co-heading it, and it will be wonderful to have your voices in there, so that this handbook or the playbook can be utilized by other students and other groups, other similar groups, activist groups that are out there, not only in the US but also internationally. So congratulations. I think it's a wonderful start and an approach. And I also want to also know from Ms. Freeman, how did she manage to have this group going, and how did she manage to have this thinking approach? And it's not just one subject or the other, but it's taking this whole system, thinking into its actual, implementation. So maybe a quick word from her before we hand over to other discussants. I'm sure Jasmine will have more questions. And thank you, Chris, for your lovely moderation and bringing this together.
Yeah, and thank you, Radhika, for the opportunity. I think it's pretty phenomenal. And of course, I would say after we get off the call, are we up for that? Because I think it's an amazing platform for them to be able to share their work. I definitely have to thank not only our presenters, but the other students who are in the room who came to make some of the posters and the artwork and some of the other hands-on stuff that accompanies all of the planning. So our program here, our enrichment program, is built with the SDGs as an integrating theme. And so I think if you've ever seen, like you could see in the back of Marcos and Callum, where they're sitting now, and Noah, that we always have the SDGs in front of us. And so all of the work that we do is always inquiry-based, solutionary, project-based learning altogether. So it starts out with students observing problems in their local community that may extend out to their global community, and then seeing how they link to the global goals, and then very specifically to the sub-targets. So first, the enrichment program is built on the SDGs, and then all through is woven in all different kind of thinking skills and ways that you organize your thinking, ways that you can get things done as a team. I think you noticed in the presentation, the students have also taken up some of the SDG 4.7 framework that you did, because when we looked at our work and we thought, oh, you know, that's what we do when we start to think about research. It's really understanding a problem and then figuring out how we can advocate, and then learning to mobilize for action and change, because that's definitely what we're geared to, work that is meaningful. So yeah, I have some of these. I mean, if you, there are like the hands-on projects that we didn't get to share today, but there's some really, really super interesting stuff. But first of all, I would say thank you, because we really tried to shoehorn, I think, a lot of the things that we do, that each one of them probably could, you know, load out to a full day. But yeah, does anybody want to add anything to that? Up for the challenge?
Yeah, so what we see is we're always focused on the SDGs, which Ms. Freeman touched on. And so we're always looking at the SDGs. How can we connect? So like she said, we're looking at problems in our local community. How do these problems not only connect to the SDGs, but we're also really close to the SDGs, where we're looking at the sub-targets in the SDGs, like you saw in the presentation, 4.7, 13.3, 12.3. We're looking at these sub-targets. How can we help move these sub-targets forward? How can we help attack these sub-targets? How can we push these targets forward with these projects that we're creating and solving problems in the community? So we're not only focused on the SDGs, but we're focused on our local community.
Which tie directly to the SDGs too, right? Because they all generate from somewhere. But the, what did I want to add? Oh my gosh, I just have to say this really quickly. The Bluebells International presentation yesterday and we, you know, kids came in were pulled from different classes to be able to watch that. And I so regretted and apologized to some of the students, say, oh my God, I didn't even think of being able to try to pull you, but we left with a lot of ideas and took notes. So I think this idea of the, you know, getting youth out there with, you know, peer-to-peer messaging and cross-exchange is just incredible. And we're so happy to be part of it.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. And actually, I had a session in the morning and they want to have a full interaction with your class. So they're saying, can we have a separate discussion and can we take this forward? And I see a lot of complementary. I think both sides will gain, because today your presentation sets the stage on how do you approach a topic, and then they have taken it forward in, you know, different ways, looking at rivers, looking at other things, looking at, you know, more scientific conservation related elements. But having said that, I think I need a replay of this discussion today with examples so that I can use this as models for different groups and different settings that we go, because I think each slide had so much a lot of thought has been put on each slide. So I think those need to be really digested, and I will definitely watch it again. But I think it will be beneficial if that playbook is developed, and the slides can have examples so that we can I think you definitely put in examples, but I would want to see maybe one or two more examples to see some variation. And of course, that has to be broken down into many different sessions. So I hope we are ready for multiple sessions on this summary that you have presented, because I think it's super phenomenal, and I'm sure I get to benefit a lot. Personally, I'm sure many people will as well. Jasmine, anything from your end?
I think that I'm going to sound like a broken record, but we learned so much from you throughout this entire set of panels that we have had. That playbook is amazing. I remember taking systems thinking for grad school, and honestly, it would have come handy then, a couple of years ago. But it's an amazing tool. And the fact that you're already so familiar with such an amazing tool at such an early age, it's just so impressive. And I know that Ms. Freeman has a lot to do with this. So I thank you also for guiding always your students into like the best directions possible. And I'm very excited to see what type of collaboration will come with Bluebells, because it will be a great partnership if you do end up working together.
So I know time is over, but maybe one question from my end, and maybe anyone can say, how did you decide where do subjects fit in here? Geography, science, social science, language arts. You have broken all those silos. We keep saying, oh, those silos have to be broken, and we need to be doing this. We need to be having systems thinking approach. In your presentation, you have broken all those silos, and you're taking this topic and approaching it in a very systematic way with various different tools. So how did you manage to, do you still see those subjects somewhere there, or do you think that we need to be following the systems approach and looking at problems on its own and then see how they spread out? I don't know if my question is clear. I'm still thinking about my question. Sorry.
So of course we see our subjects that we learn there, but we don't exactly see them as these individual blocks. We sort of see them almost mashed together into one giant subject, and it falls under the bar of systems thinking, because almost everything can be put into systems thinking. Like, for example, in science, we look at phenomenons and then we investigate them. So this really fits under the bar of systems thinking, because like you have to look at the larger issue or like phenomenon, how it impacts you, how you impact it, what happens in it. And so I feel like every subject almost hits on systems thinking without actually thinking about it, without people noticing. And I feel like I see that systems thinking can fit into any subject, and that it should almost be the base for every single subject. And how I still see the individual subjects, but they're all together under the umbrella of systems thinking.
Yeah, I might build off of what Callum said, who I think explained it really nicely, because as he was explaining it, it made me think, oh, you know what? It really gives us like a common language to speak across all of those different subjects. And another, tool set that, as grad school people, we might say that could interrogate the subject with and go deeper. I think that, with all of the students, who are here right now, they all have, their math or their advanced math or their, honors language arts or this language arts and social studies. And I think having some of these tools that help you grow your thinking a little bit is what helps them, as Callum just so succinctly explained, make those connections and make that transfer that as educators, I think we're always looking for, and that it touches real life, all the better. And I mean, that would be the point actually, right? So we also have a wonderful community that we work with who come in and work with us and serve as experts. Definitely having the EcoAmbassador network is phenomenal for us because we get perspectives that otherwise, really, we would just read about, you guys, right? Whereas yesterday we got to hear, firsthand. I honestly feel like I know the Yamuna River right now, and how, the community really values it and wants to save it. And I think, that's the key to education, right? Global worldview altogether.
That's great. And we hope to continue this journey together and have lots of exchanges, Ms. Freeman, and congratulations to you and to your class. I think super phenomenal to hear from such, young people with such, fantastic thinking. And I'm sure this thinking will be beneficial for our other students and colleagues across different continents. So hope to continue this journey together. Thank you so much for your time, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much.